The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. Usually we would be talking about all of the awesome places where you can find our information. We would be talking about the Podcasting Award, which we just won last week. I'm going to be holding off on all of that until episode 102 next week. For today, we are actually going to be chatting with Yonathan Ghersi. He is the owner of 26 Degree Brewing in Pompano. And as this episode is due to release on Friday, May 6th of 2022, the next day, which is Saturday, tomorrow, May 7th, they are going to be releasing a beer called Beer for Bombs. This is an Imperial Stout, what they are calling a Ukrainian Imperial Stout, which is correct, that was originally brewed by Pravda Brewing, which is in Lviv. They are going to be donating all of the proceeds to this beer to Pravda for reasons that we will be chatting with him in a few moments. I will give this episode a warning. We are going to be talking about some of the atrocities that are going on in the Ukraine at the hands of Russian soldiers. We will be talking about certain people that have been killed. We will be talking about some of the other atrocities. So please keep that in mind as you listen to the episode. Also, if you are interested in donating, I will be giving you information at the end. They'll be listed in the show notes, but you'll understand who you'll be donating to once you listen to this interview. Without further ado, let's listen to Yonathan Ghersi, 26 Degree Brewing, and Beer for Bombs. The craft beer industry, not just here in the state of Florida, but seems like worldwide, has a very big impetus to donate, not just to the local community, but every so often, as you mentioned, with Resilience. Resilience was kind of the first one. Then Black is Beautiful came out. There's a lot of those beers that kind of have either larger societal impact or grew well outside the confines of the city or the county or the state where it was supposed to be sort of focused.
Impactful.
Why does craft beer seem to be so excited to jump on something like that?
I'll tell you from my perspective, and I can't speak for everybody else in craft beer because it's a very diverse community and there's a lot of different motivations for different people. For us, the motivation is pretty simple. We get to do what a lot of people really dream of doing as their job. People would love, they come in here all the time and they say, oh, you brew beer for a living. That's great. This is the best job in the world. And it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes because it's still a business. We're still paying bills. We're still, handling the same ups and downs of the economy as everybody else. But yes, we are very lucky. We're very lucky that we get to brew beer for a living and people enjoy the product we put out.
So being so close to the beach, there's obviously not a lot of Ukrainian influence in Pompano Beach, but this is something that definitely spoke to you. Why did this horrific war, because let's just say what it is.
Yeah.
Why was this something that you knew you and 26 Degree had to jump on?
So a couple of different reasons. My grandparents are Polish or were Polish. They were born in Poland before World War II. They lived through that, and that obviously is, let's say, family history, and I don't want to call it trauma, but it's something that we carry on very close to our hearts. And seeing people suffer in 2022 for some oligarchs whim decides he wants to invade a country because it suits him today, number one, everybody knows it's not right. Number two, not everybody has the means to do something about it, and that we understand. But we definitely should support the people that are there. And being brewers, relating to other brewers that are, in the same industry, we know what it's like to run a brewery. We know what it's like to be on the packaging line. We understand what their day-to-day lives is like. To have to hear that the guy has to stop recording an interview and run down to a bunker because bombs are falling. I spoke with my crew here, and nobody could fathom that. It's not even in the realm of possibility that you and I are sitting here talking. It's a nice morning. It's nice and sunny out, and very quickly we would have to run for our lives. That doesn't make sense to me. And not only does it not make sense to me, it shouldn't make sense to anybody. And the reality is, if we can put 2 cents to help them, whether it's humanitarian efforts or whether it's actually creating more Molotov cocktails to disable Russian tanks, which they did, which, I'm not pro-violence, but I'm definitely pro-self-defense, then it's the least we can do.
We will definitely get to the Molotov cocktail part in a few minutes, because that is the rather interesting spin on this. But I completely agree with you. This is something that we don't have to worry about, and we shouldn't have to worry about. And
nobody should.
I really, really hope, our kids will never have to worry about this. So obviously we are faced with a horrific war that could, I guess, be described as genocide. I could be described as the rantings and ravings of a tyrant.
Yeah.
How did you come to decide, yes, we are going to make a beer for this particular instance. We are going to do our part. Because that didn't come with you specifically. You actually were approached.
Well, we were approached by the Society of Professional Journalists. They wanted to do something to represent the journalists that had perished covering the story. And when they came to me, 3 journalists had died. At this point, the number is over 7. I don't know exactly what the number is at this point, but it's much higher, unfortunately. And there was a reason I decided to brew this beer in collaboration with them. Is we want to get the word out. We want people to know, and who better to get the word out than professional journalists? It was a match that suited the objective. The objective is to raise as much money as possible. And for that, yes, we brewed and packaged the beer. We're also hosting an event here where we're going to raise funds on Saturday. And hopefully people come out and drink the beer, and all the profit from this beer is going directly to that. They'll do with it what they need to do, whether it's pay for a 7-year-old's surgery, or buy another truck for the military, or help people relocate. They're using it for whatever it is that they got to use it for.
And so usually, and you sort of hinted at this, with a beer like this, it's usually one brewery who creates the recipe and sort of, I guess, the figurehead. That brewery, I don't even know how to pronounce their name. Pravda yeah. is in the Ukraine. Yeah. It is their recipe. And you sort of mentioned that they're not really brewing beer anymore.
Well, they had to stop. They had to stop because the bombs were falling. They had to do something. And there's
but they're still bottling.
They were still bottling. They were still taking advantage of the materials they had, which is what you do in times of war. So instead of putting drinkable alcohol in the beer, they were putting probably gasoline or diesel or something else in the bottles and making Molotov cocktails. They were using that to help defend themselves, defend their country, and try and protect their people.
And so it's kind of an interesting story. But the recipe that they sort of released to the world was their Imperial Stout.
They released a bunch of recipes. Not only that, they released another one called, and you might have to bleep this out, Putin is a dickhead. And they released, I think that's a hop strong ale. They released a couple of recipes. We decided to do the Ukrainian Imperial Stout as our way of poking at the Russian Imperial Stout kind of beer that everybody knows. And we tried to be as accurate to the recipe as possible, which I think we got pretty close.
Now, that's kind of interesting because, as we were talking about before, with a beer event like this, usually breweries kind of put their own spin on it. Obviously, water profiles are never going to be the same. You'll never get the malt. Maybe exactly the same. Maybe there's additional things that you want to put in just because that is who you are as a brewery and not specifically Pravda. You went as traditional as humanly possible. First, how difficult was that to figure all of those little things out to make the beer?
When you talk to another brewery, they know exactly what you need to replicate their recipe. So they were gracious enough. They put out their water profile. They put out their exact malt bill. They put out their hopping schedule. They put out the yeast they used, and we used exactly what they had in the recipe. We didn't deviate. The reason we didn't deviate, number one, they can't brew beer. I looked at it as an opportunity for us to be them, meaning since they can't brew beer, we can brew the beer. So we'll brew the beer for them. We will package it for them. We will sell it and give them the money as if they had brewed it themselves. We'll cover our costs, which is the cost of the raw materials. I'm not covering the labor cost. We'll take care of that. That's our portion. And we will just take the profit as if it was their brewery. They're in a position where they're shut down. Well, we're in a position where we can help them out. The second reason we wanted to brew exactly what they brew there is, as a consumer, people know us. They know our beers. Not everybody knows us, but a lot of people know us. Zico's Rage got a GABF silver medal. And if they want to come have our beer, they can come have our beer anytime. This isn't our beer. This is not about us as a brewery. This is not about 26 Degree Brewing. This is about Pravda and the situation in Ukraine. And it's about raising as much money as possible for them. So if we take their beer, put our spin on it, then it becomes like a collaborative brew. And it felt too much like we're trying to push our process into this thing. I want this to be theirs, the way that they would have done it in their brewery, the way they present it to their customers. And we're going to try and do the same on Saturday.
Gotcha. So obviously it's being packaged. It's a 4-pack of tall boys. And as I'm looking at it, there are a couple of faces and photos that are on the side of the label. I would assume that those are the first journalists that were killed in the line of duty covering this event.
So Pierre, Sasha, and Brent were the first 3 that were reported as having perished covering the story. And then there have been a few more. I think we have some of those listed on the side of the can there. And if they're not...
Yes, there's several names.
Yeah, we do have a few more on there. Obviously, we probably didn't cover all of them because there have been more since. So it's sad that it's gotten to a point where, Russia's doing things that, are unspeakable in terms of the way they're handling the situation. They're bombing buildings with kids. They're, going after civilians. They're not targeting specifically military objectives.
The rates of sexual assault are mind-blowing and very disgusting.
Yeah. Not something that I like to think about on a daily basis, having 3 kids, here.
No, I completely understand. And so this beer will officially release on Saturday.
Yep. May 7th.
And you're going to be throwing an event.
We have an event. It goes from 5 to 7. We have Ukrainian dancers and folk singers are going to be here. We're going to be releasing the beer. There's also food from Flanagan's is going to be available. We will be doing brewery tours and a guided tasting of the beer as well.
Excellent. And in terms of the recipe, is this something that, or not just the recipe, but the beer itself, is this something that as the war continues, this is something that you can see continuing to package and release?
I hope for this first one, we brewed about a 15-barrel batch, which is half of our batch size. I hope that it sells out and that there are requests for more. And if there are, we'll brew it again and we'll keep donating the proceeds. Hopefully the war ends tomorrow, right? And we can sell this out and donate the proceeds for reconstruction and rebuilding of people's lives.
Yeah, my definite hope is that this podcast that we're recording right now is completely useless by the time we release it.
Exactly.
Did you and your team learn a little bit more about this kind of style of beer while taking a look at the recipe? It's something that I've heard a number of other brewers have said, yeah, I didn't know to do that.
It's always, when you look at somebody else's recipe, you're looking kind of a little bit into their soul, how they build beers, what they feel about beers, what people in that country like to drink. So yeah, we definitely look at it and try and get a little more context out of it, just from trying to understand what malts they used, why they used them in the way that they did. The water profiles are also interesting, how hard or soft the water is, depending on what they're trying to achieve. All of that, it's always a learning experience. And we also contract brew quite a bit, and we see a lot of other people's recipes. We always try and replicate as accurately as possible the recipe or the intention of the recipe. Sometimes the recipe doesn't come with all the information, so we have to fill in some gaps. Other times the recipe has everything, and we have to absolutely just follow it like a formula. But we always learn something. I mean, if you don't learn something every day, I think you're probably just hiding under a rock.
Exactly. So you've got it on tap. The 4-packs are, how much are they going for?
$16.
That's not bad at all. And all of the profit is going directly to
Pravda. So we are taking cost of grain and cost of packaging materials. I tried to get the labels for free, but didn't really work out that way. And the grains also. But again, you can't expect everybody else to drop what they're doing for what you believe in.
Gotcha.
So that's all we're going to take back out of it. And then everything else is going to go to them. I hope we hit $10,000. I mean, we have enough on draft to probably do $4,000 to $5,000 on Saturday if we drink through all the kegs that we have. If we don't, it'll still stay on tap, and we'll continue to accumulate that money and send it over whenever reasonable. There's also going to be shirt sales that all the money is going. Like, you're literally going to Venmo or GoFundMe direct to Pravda, show us the receipt, and you're going to get a t-shirt.
That's awesome. So you don't even get it.
I don't even want to touch the money. There's no reason for me to.
That's amazing.
If I could do it with the beer, technically not legal. If I could do it with the beer, I would do it. But we can't. We have to sell it through our tap room, and then we donate the proceeds. The state still wants their tax revenue, so we still have to pay for that.
Awesome. So that is definitely a fantastic beer that I'm looking forward to trying, and obviously very important and hopefully finished reason why this beer was made. Fingers crossed. My last question for you is something that I've had on my mind. Do you think that as a result of this, that the craft brewing community as a whole will drop the Russian from Russian Imperial Stout?
That's such a tough question.
Because you kind of did it with this beer, which I completely understand. Yeah, it isn't Russian, it's Ukrainian.
We did it specifically for this beer. This is the answer to this is very complicated, at least from my perspective. The first part of the answer is that probably the majority of Russian people have no interest in what's happening in Ukraine. They don't want to be there. They don't want their armed forces to be there. They don't want Putin as a president.
And as we talk about journalism, the journalism in Russia is not exactly.
It's not real.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I come originally from Venezuela. In the last 15 years in Venezuela, there has been no real journalism there either. So the reality is that if you ask me, should we take it out on all the Russians? I don't think you can. I don't think that's fair. I think a lot of the Russians are probably suffering with the way the ruble fell, with the way that the sanctions are being imposed. And I'm not against the sanctions, but the reality is that the people that are suffering, yes, Ukraine, priority number one, they're getting bombed, the people are getting killed, their lives are uprooted. Secondary long-term effects somewhere. Listen, Russian people in poor towns, which I had the luck to go to Russia in 2019, those people are going to suffer equally at the hand of Putin. And it's tough for me to say, drop the Russian from the Russian Imperial Stout. If people want to do it, that's fine. We used to call our Zico's Rage a Russian Imperial Stout. It's not a Russian Imperial Stout. We call it an Imperial. It's more accurate to the beer. It's more accurate to the flavor. So that's what we call it. Am I expecting other people to change the name of their beers for it? I don't think it's that important. I really don't think that it affects anything. If anything, maybe they can do some sort of fundraiser for a similar situation and pay for the right to use whatever name they want.
So, well, let's try to get Pravda as much money as we can, shall we?
That's what we're here for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So there is the interview. I was able to try the beer. It's pretty fantastic. Very different from a traditional Imperial Stout. It uses a little bit of smoked malt, so it's got a little bit of smokiness on the back end. There are also a number of very piquant and almost earthy hops, so it's a little bit hoppier than a normal Imperial Stout. It's also a little bit lighter in body than an Imperial Stout that you would generally find here in the US, and especially in the state of Florida. He mentioned the t-shirt sales and how you will be able to donate directly to a GoFundMe to give money directly to Pravda Brewing. I am going to include the link for that GoFundMe page in the show notes. If you can, and I hope that you can, please consider donating to them, donating to the effort. And like we both mentioned, hopefully by the time this episode comes out, there is nothing to donate for because everything is over. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be that way. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a happier episode and a lot of fun. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. If you're able to go out and support this worthy cause, please do so, whether it's at 26 Degree Brewing tomorrow or just any sort of event or charity in general for the people of Ukraine. Once again, this is Dave, your host and author. Thank you so much for listening, and drink Florida Craft.